Good evening and welcome. You're watching The Big Story. Now, over the last 2 days, the auto sector has witnessed a lot of activity. The Uttar Pradesh government is meeting all EV makers in India tomorrow. Now, this comes after the state government waived off registration fees on hybrid cars yesterday. Maruti Suzuki rallied on the back of this announcement. Meanwhile, Tata Motors and M&M announced price cuts in order to incentivize the customers. However, Mahindra and Mahindra cleared the air later on today and said that the price cut was not influenced by the Uttar Pradesh government's tax waiver. To understand the key reasons for the buzz in the auto sector, we are now joined in the studio by Tushar. Tushar, hi. To begin with, of course, there is a lot of buzz in the auto sector. Now, there's been a lot that's happened since yesterday as far as policy is concerned, particularly the Uttar Pradesh government policy. And tomorrow, they're also meeting EV makers. So give us an overall sense of what you feel is happening.
So, Nupur, first of all, good evening. It's a significant couple of days that we have seen so far. At first, the UP government's decision to waive off the road tax on strong hybrid and plug-in hybrid cars was announced on in a circular dated 5th July. That effectively means that Maruti Suzuki stands to gain along with Toyota as well as Honda. So Maruti has two strong hybrid cars. One is the Grand Vitara in the mid-size XUV segment, and the Invicto, which is in the MPV segment, the 7-seater segment. Priced substantially higher, but again, it's a 3 lakh to 3.5 lakh benefit straight away, saving on the road tax. Similarly, Toyota also benefits because it has the Hyryder as well as the Innova Hycross. And Honda City's lone city sedan, the hybrid version, also gains from this particular tax break, so to speak, from the UP government.
All right. Now, that's not it, of course. We've seen a bit of a price war also that's taken place. Tata Motors took the lead yesterday. They slashed prices. M&M followed suit as well. They also slashed prices. So what's happening over there? Is this, Tushar, in some way linked to a mismatch between demand and supply?
We'll have to see this from two sides, first of all. First of all, we have had conversations with analysts and industry watchers, and that's what they've said, that this can be the price revision by Tata Motors, that's up to 1.5 lakh on the Safari and Harrier SUVs, again mid-size SUVs, as well as the revision by Mahindra on its XUV 700 AX7 variant is a response to the UP tax revision, the tax waiver, so to speak. It's happened because of that, because of that. And secondly, there is an inventory pile-up that's happened in the industry. The industry is staring at about 65 to 70 days of inventory. That's about 7 lakh units, which translates to about 70,000 crores of unsold stock if you consider the average selling price of a car in India at about 10 to 11 lakh rupees.
All right. Let's also listen in to Vinkesh Gulati. He's the chairperson of FADA Academy and Research. He spoke about the demand and supply mismatch in the auto manufacturing industry. And that is being touted as one of the reasons for what we are seeing in terms of price cuts by major auto manufacturers.
If the demand is not there, you will have to reduce the supply. But if a manufacturer thinks by reducing the supply, the cost, or you can see the efficiency loss what they are having is not matching, they continue to not reduce the supplies and push the inventory towards dealer. And when such a situation happens, they have to again support us from somewhere, interest or rotation of funds, and then in turn even discounts to the customer. I feel the best thing to do is, as per demand, the supply should be retuned.
Right now, earlier, Tushar, before we came into the studio, we were talking generally about the other aspect of it, that's the EV space. Now, we've seen a lot of incentivization given in the past in the EV space, but the demand hasn't picked up. And in fact, even globally, we are seeing, a sort of a downfall in that.
So, Nupur, we have to understand that this is still a very new technology, and consumers are still warming up to the idea of charging their cars on a daily basis like do their cell phones. So essentially the adoption is limited so far as in the four-wheeler space is concerned. It's just about 2.5% of the overall market, which is about 40 million units, 4 million units at this point of time, 40 lakh units. That's because one reason is range anxiety. people are worried about taking the car out. And the second is that the charging infrastructure has not kept up pace with the number of launches that have happened. Yes, Tata Motors sells a large number of electric vehicles, electric cars. It's the market leader with 75% market share. But still, the adoption across the board has yet to pick up. Apart from that, policy has also come in. You have the tax breaks, so the GST of 5% on it as compared to an ICE vehicle, which is at 48%. Hybrid vehicles are charged at 43%. Despite that, despite FAME 2 subsidy, despite demands of FAME 3, it still will take some time for the buyer to warm up to the idea of an electric vehicle or an electric car as the only car in the garage.
Absolutely. So, in fact, we have heard from the auto space where Anish Shah, of course, has spoken this evening, and he's said that the EV space still needs a lot of incentives in terms of policy. Let's listen into what he said.
Three-wheelers. The industry today is at a 20% adoption of three-wheelers. The Mahindra business is 60%. I did have to add that here as well. But within the next 6 years, by 2030, we expect the last mile, which is electric three-wheelers and the small four-wheelers for cargo, to be at 100%. And a lot of credit to the government for what it has done. The FAME 2 policy has contributed a lot in that regard. FAME 3, as it comes out, will be required in that sense. But beyond that, and beyond FAME 3 and PLI, by 2030, the industry will not ask for any incentives. And that is exactly how incentives should work.
All right. So, Tushar, you heard him say that we're not going to ask for anything beyond 2030. But what's your sense of that? Is that too short a period? Because it's just about 6 years from now. Too short a period to actually drive growth in that space?
So, Mahindra expects the volumes to pick up. We are moving towards an electrified future. There is no doubt about it. But to say that we may not entirely need, he's expecting that the charging infrastructure will also keep pace. He's expecting that that thing also comes in. Then we can say that about 30% of the entire overall market will be electrified. How the rest of the decade pans out, we'll only be able to see. But given the adoption at this point of time and the teething trouble, so to speak, that the electric vehicle space is seeing, it's anybody's guess to actually where we'll actually stand in 2030.
All right, so still some time away. In fact, to talk to us more about this activity that we are seeing in the auto sector, Hormazd Sorabjee, the editor of Autocar India, is joining us. Hi, Hormazd. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. To begin with, the auto sector obviously has seen a lot of buzz in the past 2 days, especially the SUV segment with both Tata Motors and M&M announcing price cuts. Now, do you see this an attempt to stimulate demand, especially since there is a lot of unsold inventory lying?
Well, I think we need to go back a couple of years, just coming out of COVID. I think at that time, there was a complete supply-demand mismatch the other way around. You had a huge pent-up demand and you had simultaneously supply chain issues, semiconductor crisis. So clearly at that point, I think demand far outstripped supply. And in that scenario, what we saw is that manufacturers like Mahindra consistently taking prices up. I mean, if you see the XUV 700 on which they've cut prices, and you see how they have successively increased the price, over the years. I mean, right now, for someone to pay, it would be unheard of for someone to pay over 30 lakhs for a Mahindra, but that's what has happened. So I think, right now we are seeing a massive correction. It's coming sort of back to business as usual. Supply chain issues have been completely sorted out. There's no problem over there. And we are seeing short, absolute flattening of demand. That final pent-up demand is finally over. We are finding a new equilibrium right now. And in this, inventories have piled up, as the other panelists have said. And clearly, discounts is one way to move that stock faster. But I think going forward, production runs will have to be kind of trimmed, adjusted, because the last thing you want is to get back into the pre-COVID area of, just oversupply, huge inventories, huge stocks. and that causes a lot of stress in the market, especially in the retail part of it.
Right, I think Tushar had a question particularly about Mahindra.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Hormazd. Tushar here.
Hi, Tushar.
Hi. So, specific to Mahindra, I wanted to ask a question that the scenario is actually flipped. Correct me if I'm wrong. The AX7 variants were much more in demand in 2023. Now the AX5 Select has come in and the demand has shifted there. So essentially, how does Mahindra fix this particular bottleneck, so to speak, in their production? I mean, their production is limited. They have been consistently increasing their production, but they're still not matching up to the order book. Where does Mahindra go from here if such small changes bring such big changes and as well as discounts?
Yeah, so I think, fundamentally, I would still say the XUV 700 is a strong product. There's a good demand for it. But I think, as I said earlier, I think the X7 has just overpriced itself. It's priced itself out of the market, to be honest. It's very, very expensive, and we are seeing that correction. Obviously, customers are looking at the lower variants, as you said, the AX5. So I think, at the end of the day, at whatever price point, customers are value conscious. They're kind of seeing where they see the most value. And I think the challenge really is for Mahindra to adjust, cost correct their production schedules. And that's not only, even the suppliers accordingly will have to kind of, adjust. And it's not easy. I mean, it's like turning a huge ship, which has a lot of momentum. But I think, this is what the company will have to be very kind of cognizant about. They'll have to kind of look at these sudden shifts in consumer patterns and demand. But I think, XUV 700 is still a hero product for Mahindra, as is the Scorpio right now, and the Thar, and the 5-door Thar will be coming out. So, I mean, I think Mahindra, of all companies, are in a much better place than a lot of others in that sense. But again, coming back to what you had said of the X7, I just think it's become too expensive.
Right, Hormazd, let's talk about a bit about policy now. We've seen Uttar Pradesh government come out and waive off the registration on hybrid vehicles yesterday. There is some expectation that other states might follow suit. But do you think that we need more such policies to boost consumers to adoption of hybrid cars, since people, still seem to need a lot of prodding to adopt to greener options?
Well, I think, there are two ways of looking at this. I think clearly, if you look at it holistically, I think it's logical that a car that pollutes less should pay less tax. It's as simple as that. Hybrids definitely are a fantastic solution in the transition to, full electrification, which is taking much longer than anticipated for various reasons. Fundamentally, charging infra, especially home charging infra, is turning out to be the biggest bottleneck. You don't have that problem with a hybrid.
But as Hormazd was saying, one of the key issues right now seems to be making way in that EV space. Even the government has put in policies for the adoption of EVs, but it hasn't been as fast, Tushar, as everybody would like it to be. Now, one of the key things, obviously, is infrastructure. We've seen EV makers and the auto industry come out and ask the government for faster upgradation of infrastructure, but it's still taking a lot of time, isn't it?
Yes. So it's not. How do I put it? It's not an overnight change that you can bring in. So even if you want to set up charging points, they take time to set up. They take time to spread across even a big city like Mumbai or Delhi. So it takes time on that thing. But I think we should also wake up to the possibility of multiple powertrains going into the future. If we say that, no, the future is electric only, that may not necessarily be the answer to our mobility concerns. Right. So essentially, why not wake up to the idea of multiple powertrains? Petrol cars, CNG cars, hybrid cars, EV cars. So that actually solves all your problems that, okay, we are not putting all our eggs in one basket, that is the electric vehicles.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So that's what we are hearing right now, that The government obviously wanting EV adoption as fast as it happens. You are watching the big story on NDTV Profit. What we're discussing this evening is all the action we've seen in the auto sector, not just some of the stocks buzzing. Maruti, of course, was buzzing yesterday, leading the pack over there. But apart from that, we've seen price slashes coming in from Tata Motors as well as M&M. To discuss all that, we continue to be joined by Hormazd. Hormazd, I wanted to come back to you on the EV space now. Obviously, in terms of infrastructure, as we've been discussing, there's still a lot that needs to be done. As far as policy is concerned, we've had people like Anisha and the others from the sector asking for more policy towards adoption of the EV. What's your sense largely of that sector? Why is the demand going down globally? And of course, India is following suit as well.
Well, I think, as far as incentives go, I think, our government has actually done a pretty good job. 5% GST compared to up to 48% for cars. That's a huge delta. And honestly, it's narrowed the gap between ICE and EV products. A lot of states, as you know, no road tax. So there are enough benefits, fiscal benefits that way. But I think what you cannot get over the fact that charging infrastructure is actually the single biggest problem. And you have range anxiety, you have something called queue anxiety, which is, there's a car or two cars before you at a charging station. So really, it's not, from the customer's point of view, the early adopters, they've all gone. Now you've got the early majority, which are a lot more skeptical. They are going to analyze whether an EV makes more sense. And there's one big bomb that's waiting to drop, and that is resale value. No one's really talked about that because the EVs are really quite new, not more than 5 years old. So they've not really come into the used car market. But small, let's say anecdotal incidents or sales which we've seen show that there's going to be a massive drop in resale value. So that's really another kind of let's say hurdle to contend with. But having said that, I think long term you can't stop this transition. We are going to see a bit of road bumps and some hiccups. But I think, as technology progresses, eventually you'll be moving to solid state batteries. I think full electrification will come. It's just how fast that, we are not so sure about.
Right. As you're saying, there are a lot of red flags at this moment, at least, for customers to analyze before they actually go into that space. But let's quickly listen into what M&M's Anish Shah has said. He says that the auto industry will not need incentives beyond 2030. And we're going to come back to you, Hormazd, to understand whether you agree with that or not.
For electric three-wheelers, the industry today is at a 20% adoption of three-wheelers. The Mahindra business is 60%. I did have to add that here as well. But within the next 6 years, by 2030, we expect the last mile, which is electric three-wheelers and the small four-wheelers for cargo, to be at 100%. And a lot of credit to the government for what it has done. The FAME 2 policy has contributed a lot in that regard. FAME 3, as it comes out, will be required in that sense. But beyond that, and beyond FAME 3 and PLI, by 2030, the industry will not ask for any incentives. And that is exactly how incentives should work.
All right, Hormazd, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, clearly, I think 2030 is too long. I think, incentives need to be rolled back a little before that. Clearly, I think, costs are going to come down as the supply chain in India, which is the EV supply chain, which is still very much in its nascent stage, starts developing. Costs will automatically come down with more and more localization. Don't forget, we still don't manufacture batteries at the cell level. There are plans, big plans, a lot of companies are setting up cell manufacturing over here. That also would reduce cost to some extent. But I think what we've not discussed at all is that in 2027, 28, CAFE 3 norms are likely to come in. And that is going to be an existential issue for a lot of automakers. It will mean that you have to have at least, in some cases, 15 to 20% of your entire fleet electrified. Otherwise, you won't meet the CAFE norms because they're getting much, much tougher. The final value is not sorted, but it could be in the low 90s. And the double whammy is that it's going to move from the MIDC to the WLTP cycle, which is again about 16, 17% more stringent. So on top of that, you've got a tougher emission cycle, and it's going to be very, very hard for people with a pure ICE portfolio, or impossible if you have a pure ICE portfolio, to meet CAFE targets. And if you don't meet them, you could attract huge fines. So I think CAFE itself is going to speed up electrification, whether there's government incentives or not, because you just don't want to end up paying those hefty fines. So I think that's something which is going to be quite a tipping point when that regulation comes in, to speed up electrification and even hybrids for that matter, because they also, from a CO2 perspective, are far better than any ICE vehicle right now.
Okay, Hormazd, you sort of preempted my question about the CAFE 3. So do you think Maruti should not just rely on hybrids and start introducing electric cars as soon as possible? And with Mahindra lining up its electric launches from January next year, should it actually explore the hybrid space as well, given the tax break that it has received from the UP government?
Well, I think, as you earlier said, it's great to be present in all technologies, but realistically, it's not possible. I mean, only companies with very, very deep pockets can afford to invest in multiple technologies, which are eye-wateringly experienced. Clearly, for Mahindra right now, they don't have the bandwidth to go into hybrids, neither do Tata Motors. And, they've been led down the EV path by policy and everyone pushing for EVs. So, that's the path they've chosen. And, one has to kind of, acknowledge that this is a path, the long-term path that has to, you have to go down. Hybrids are an interim solution. And clearly, a company which has a mix of all is going to come out, let's say, top dog in this CO2 race. And, while people say that Maruti doesn't have EVs, I think we have to understand that Maruti has got a highly aggressive EV plan from 26, 27. There are going to be 2 EVs coming out next year. It's been delayed right now. It was to come out this month, but there were some certain software issues which has kind of pushed it by 6 months. But they're coming out with an SUV and an MPV. But beyond that, we're going to be having low-cost EVs from Maruti as well. So I think Maruti of all is very well placed, or best placed from a long-term perspective, to meet CAFE norms, and at the same time, from a consumer perspective, to offer combination of ICE, hybrid, and EVs. But I think the Indian automakers, mainly Mahindra and Tata Motors, they've chosen the EV route and they're betting on that. And quite frankly, if Tata Motors already is, sailing as far as CAFE goes. It's probably, with its mix of EVs, a high percentage of EVs is very comfortably CAFE compliant. Mahindra, with its aggressive launch of EVs, they would need to sell about, I think, 15 to 20% of their portfolio would have to be EVs for them to be CAFE compliant when CAFE 3 comes in. So they're working towards that. They've got the models lined up, and every manufacturer at the back of his mind has this deadline of CAFE 3, because, as I said, that's going to be something existential. And if companies like the smaller fringe players, Renault, Nissan, if they don't have EVs, it's going to be very hard for them to survive, because you just can't carry that burden of the fines not being CAFE compliant would attract.
All right. Thank you so much. Yeah.
All right, Hormazd, thank you very much for joining us this evening. I'm afraid we're running out of time completely. Thank you, Tushar, to you as well for joining in on the big story. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, news and updates, of course, continue on NDTV Profit. Stay with us.